well, hello. My name is Brandon Davis, one of the ESOL lead teachers for Richland School District 2. And with us today we have Abigail Alfaro. She is a former Richland 2 graduate and was actually born in Costa Rica. And she is here to kind of just tell us a little bit about being an English language learner in Richland School District 2. So Abigail, if you could just tell us about your story.
Yeah, so I came to the United States when I was 7 years old.
Okay.
I knew one phrase, which was, can I go to the restroom? And it saved me a few times, but it was a interesting and exciting new time coming to the United States. I was really excited because there were classes designed just for me, for people who were learning the language, and there were people on my kind of level from different cultures too, but I found a lot of people who spoke Spanish. But it was a time where I was also very scared, and I think I cried the entire first week I believe it was second grade. And yeah, I have been here in the US ever since. I learned English through ESOL. I think in about 4 or 5 months I could pretty much speak it fluently, and then writing and grammar kind of took a little bit longer after that.
Okay.
But yeah, so I went to Dent Middle School.
Okay.
I went to Richland Northeast High School.
Awesome.
And I graduated from there.
Okay, awesome. So what would you say is the most difficult part about being in schools in the United States in a country where you came in not knowing the language? What was the hardest part about that?
I think the hardest part about that is that there's so much going on in a 7-year-old's brain at that moment. There is, of course, the language barrier, but there's so many other minute things that I was having to process at the same time. For example, something as small as the times were different. So in Costa Rica, we go to school from February to November. And here we went to school from August to May-ish or June. That's something that was completely different. The style of the classroom, just the way that things would go, are different. There's, at least for me, there wasn't a single teacher or professor that I could call to at any time. And so a lot of processing to do. Food's different too, which is kind of, you don't really think about it, but when your digestive system is doing funny things, of course it's gonna affect the way that you see school. Friends are different, and I think that the most frustrating thing about that is that you can't really communicate those things. I remember one particular instance where my teacher was asking me what my middle or my last name was, and I couldn't understand her. I didn't understand her at all, and it turns out she wanted to write my last name into a little card so that I could have it on my desk, and everyone would have these cards that we would know everyone by. And because I didn't understand her, she spelled it wrong. And for the rest of the year, I would look at my name tag on my desk, and it was just wrong. And I remember I would like pencil over it, try to make it right. But it's confusing, and it was never hard for me back home to let people know that I'm smart, that I'm competitive, that I'm all of me, pretty much. And now, not only am I having to overcome just the shock of being in a new school and being shy around new people, but I'm also having to overcome this barrier of how do I even let you know who I am. So I think that's probably the most frustrating thing, is having to process all of these shocks, but also not being able to communicate that to anyone else.
Okay. And lastly, what would you, if you could tell teachers of English language learners, whether that be ESOL teachers or just classroom teachers, what would you tell them when working with English language learners? Sorry.
Yeah, so one of the most important things, I think, is patience. Lots of patience. These kids, like myself, are having to process so much, and oftentimes it's frustrating. In very practical terms, it can be infuriating, but it can also be disheartening. So just having patience and bearing through as each child processes differently, is of utmost importance. And also just trying to understand things from a different perspective. I know that from my background, I had this particular experience, but other kids might come from schools that are more similar to American schools or more different than my experience was. So just bearing with and trying to put yourself into the shoes of whatever culture or background a child comes from can go a long way. I think empathy was probably one of the key factors of me feeling like I fit in. One of the things that I remember the most is that this wasn't even my ESOL teacher, this was just my regular homeroom teacher who spoke zero Spanish and I spoke zero English. And during the Pledge of Allegiance, I would pretty much cry for the first week every day. And she held me. She just held me the whole week, and she would comfort me. And that just made me feel like I belonged. And I think empathy kind of breaks those barriers.
Awesome.
So I would say those three things are probably the most important.
Awesome. Well, thank you for spending your time with us today, and we appreciate you coming out to talk to us about that.
Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. Thank you.